Hello, and welcome to Sonata She Wrote. Today we are discussing the 12th and the final song of Part 1 of Schubert's Winterreise, called Einsamkeit, or Loneliness. Lauri Suurpää, in her book Death in Winterreise, writes that after the remainder of the third thematic group, the journey continues. The narrator sees no consolation and simply goes on walking. Part 1 of Winterreise thus ends in deep depression, whose reasons are clearly recalled and encapsulated in the preceding poem, Frühlingsstraum. It seems that the protagonist no longer contemplates regaining lost happiness, which was abandoned for good in Frühlingsstraum. Part 1 of Winterreise thus forms a clear narrative, which stems from the chronology, the events, the environment, and the protagonist's emotions. The plodding introduction which opens the song highlights the exhaustion of the wanderer's body and mind.
Wie eine trübe Wolke durch heitere Lüfte geht, wenn in dir Tannenwipfel ein mattes Lüftchen weht, so zieh ich meine Straße dahin mit trägem Fuß. Durch helles, frohes Leben, einsam und ohne Gruß.
This is a musical representation of weariness. The mechanical, plodding ostinato in the piano, the D minor pedal throughout the entire first stanza, and, as Susan Youens describes the wanderer, he is obsessed with his loneliness and sense of different from others, and he imagines analogies in nature both for his slow, tired motion and the marks of his separation from others. It is a disturbing measure of his alienation that the standard of comparison, here as elsewhere, is not to be found in living beings, but in non-human nature. He is, he says, like a dismal cloud, barely propelled through the treetops by a small and weary puff of air. Finally, in verse 2, Schubert will break away from the gravitational pull of D minor, or B minor, depending on which version of the song you're using. Exaggerated psi motifs and the turmoil of chromatic chord planing accompany the wanderer as he recalls a time when the storm raged, a time when he actually felt something, even if that something was profoundly negative. He feels anything would be better than the nothingness inside him now. Before we listen, I do want to point out that initially, this was actually the end of the cycle. It ends up being near the end of the published poetic cycle, but initially, Schubert only had the first published 12 songs, of which this was the finale.
Ach, dass die Luft so ruhig, ach, dass die Welt so liegt, als noch die Stürme tobten, war ich so elend nicht. Ach, dass die Luft so ruhig, ach, dass die Welt so liegt, als noch die Stürme tobten, war ich so elend nicht.
Before I close, I'm going to do something a little unusual in this song and point out something which I can't fully explain, and I'm not even sure is intentionally present. And that is a motivic similarity to an early song in the cycle, Gefrorene Tränen. This section toward the middle of the B section of Einsamkeit.
War ich so elend nicht.
This gesture here has a very close match in the third song of the overall cycle, which you can see and hear now.
Dass ich geweinet hab, dass ich geweinet hab.
I try to read whatever I can find about the cycles, but I haven't been able to find any other theorist who has made this connection. And as I said, I'm not 100% sure it's an intentional referential choice by Schubert. So I'm actually putting the question to you, the viewer. First, do you think that this is an intentional backwards reference? And second, if you do, what do you think the connection is? I hope you enjoyed my analysis of Einsamkeit. The next song, number 13, is Die Post. As always, thank you to my patrons who you can see on the screen now. If you'd like to join my Patreon for any amount, you'll have access to 2 videos analyzing Mahler's First Symphony. You can do so at patreon.com/Sonata She Wrote. As always, thank you for joining me.